welcome to Crank It Up. I'm Jim Price, and this is my review of Action Heroes from Smash Up's next expansion, Excellent Movies, Dude. Like Backtimers last week, I'll say right out of the gate that this is one of the hardest videos I've ever had to make, because Action Heroes make me feel very conflicted. And in case you are worried about two difficult videos in a row, let me ease your fears by saying that you have nothing to worry about with Race Rustlers. I will do my best to avoid contradicting my past, present, and future self in this video, because the premise of Action Heroes is one that is extremely specific and goes against, in my opinion, the entire spirit of Smash Up. They want to only have one minion on a base. In Smash Up, there is the idea of a singularly powerful minion, which refers to the strategy that a base is led by one large minion rather than several small ones. But when I use that term SPM, I generally mean that among your minions, one of them is singularly more powerful than the rest, not that there is a single minion who happens to be really powerful. There is also a tremendous difference between having the tools to build an SPM and being explicitly told to do so, which is what Action Heroes does. It's hard to talk about Action Heroes without specifically talking about the goal of a one minion win. The closest we came before was Polar Commando, which is widely considered to be among the worst minions in the game because of the negative progression it brings. Investing more in a base, which is a good thing, suddenly feels like a bad thing, and the Bear Cavalry have no context to make it work. But the question is, how would it actually work if you had that context? In my experience, Action Heroes work a little too well because I find the premise to be so bad that the only way it works is to find ways to circumvent it, and if you can do that, they feel really powerful. But for me and several others I've talked to, it feels really wrong. To understand this, it helps to frame this around someone like Rumbro. Rumbro is a 5 who can function like a 9. Rumbro only works if he is your only minion on the base. With the average minion power being 3, any minion you add will result in less distance to capturing the base, even if your action power goes up, and 5 power isn't going to win you anything. That means Action Heroes need to supply action-based power so that they have enough oomph to actually win. But their Phase 2 cards tend to fall into two categories: those that constantly require one minion, and those that just situationally do. Normal Bandit would say that temporary cards are the ones that are better because they allow for more partners, but there is an extremely thin line between flexibility and being a gimmick, and it is super easy to cross that line, and I find myself consistently compelled to cross it when I play this faction, which is why it keeps feeling wrong. And it makes me want to advocate for what are, in my opinion, worse cards, because then they would be more in line with the faction direction, and you can see how that makes me feel conflicted. To see an example of that exploitation, consider working backwards. If the goal is to win the base with one minion, that means that the action needs to supply the rest. But you also play one minion in a turn, which means that it could be the minion you play that turn. Normally this would be 0 to breakpoint, but it doesn't feel like a normal 0 to breakpoint. It feels like you are really just sitting back and waiting and relying on quality of cards rather than quantity of them, which suggests an internal imbalance, even though it's hard to fathom where all the power comes from. On paper, the Action Heroes don't seem that great, but their results have been incredibly strong because of the ease of their exploit. Of the constant cards, the one that stands out the most is the double feature Lone Wolf. 2 power always, or 4 power if it is your only minion there. Again, there is a sense of negative progression if you try to use your other faction, and Action Heroes are asking you to ignore 50% of your other faction on bases where they are leading the charge. But it is constant, so it cannot easily be gimmicked. Compare that with the temporary effect like Warbro and Slow-Mo Attack, which sounds like the name of a card that can put a card in stasis. At the time of trigger, you only need to have one minion there, which means you can get 6 breakpoint reduction, then ignore much of the restriction because they don't have to remain that way. This is also true of a double feature All Out of Bubblegum, which is a yield to rage type. Between these cards, that's 10 pseudo power to work with, which isn't all that much, but Warbro is renewable. But nothing stops you from moving there or playing there, and so the restriction is very fleeting in nature. It's because of this that the two Action Heroes I like are those who have a sense of lingering presence: Gracie Brones and Kickbox Bro. Both of these minions need to survive a turn to be effective, and I think that is a good thing. In Gracie's case, there is a real sense of flirting with danger, but in a good way, because she is a 5 who can become a 7. But if you give her 2 counters, and I generally think you can get away with 7 for 1 turn on an empty base, she can become an 11 instead. There is an extreme tendency to play Action Heroes bursty, but these two don't work that way. And while Gracie only cares about her restriction for a particular moment, she does so in a way that feels natural. Like, I'm going to break this base, so jump on when you can, and her restriction is meaningful despite its limited nature. This is also true of Kickbox Bro, who needs to be able to store a card and remain the only minion in order to play it as a special. And storing in this context, because it is deferred, really feels earned. The problem with Gracie is that she doesn't have an internal complement for that second turn. Fortunately, that is what your partner is for, which makes me wonder why this idea was even visited at all. Historically speaking, largely because of princesses, I used to think that factions with fewer, more powerful minions were bad, but it turns out princesses just have a lot of bad cards. I think that these types of factions are weaker, but they end up working because of above average cards to make them more consistent, and if you can exploit those above average cards, they become exceptional. I think this is very true of searching. You have fewer minions, which is bad, so you give them searching, which is incredibly strong, and it lets them get the specific minion for the job, which is even stronger than having a normal distribution, because you always have access to leader types. Given that you don't play every minion in your deck anyway, being able to grab the specific ones you will play is even stronger still, and they can recur that minion, making the opportunity cost of setting up with search go even farther. Naturally, as a faction with more actions, they will get extra action plays, so if you improve the quality of those plays, the cards start to chain together, which is where their 0 to breakpoint comes alive. When I've enjoyed action heroes to the best extent possible, it was leaning into their come-at-me tendencies and inviting intrigue. They have tools with Gracie to threaten becoming secretly powerful. They have Kickbox Bro for mole-like plays, especially if you store friends through eternity. They have Final Stand, which can be really strong because it destroys based on printed power. Another play I really like is to have Kickbox Bro store the right person, which is a much harder card to play in Phase 2 with a tight board, but it works really well in a come-at-me since you can play an extra minion to start the next base on someone else's turn while keeping the action chain going. Gracie is generally that minion because you can follow up the action chain with more buffs to Kickbox Bro, including a terminal play of pushing the limit. If you can use these tools to steal on someone else's turn with Kickbox Bro, Gracie starts off next turn with 11 power, but she was out with no risk, and then you can play your turn as normal. Unfortunately, we cannot talk about action heroes without talking about the latest chapter in the Funbear saga, Funbear Bro. I've lost count of how many Funbear types the game has tried to introduce that players have kicked out, and I'm curious why the game insists always on including them. If you follow the channel, you've heard all this before. If I know you can react to the power, I can predetermine whether or not you will, and you have little reason to, since it makes my life more efficient. I did, however, question whether or not starting arbitrarily high made a difference, and I ran a number of simulations to see what would happen in various scenarios. I personally found that having the higher power was worse, because while it kept Funbear Bro with relative parity, it meant that any decent-sized burst pushed it to breakpoint. For example, consider a groupie burst. A groupie burst adds 10, whereas Funbear Bro adds 5, so they are equal at 10, but there is still the action to augment them further. So it's easy for Rockstars to get to 15 compared to 10. For Funbear Bro to work, you need specials to allow you to overtake them, but the moment you start saying yes, you've telegraphed that. Think about it from the most basic perspective. The higher power that you start with, the less minions they actually need to play in order to get to the breakpoint, which is the less amount of times that Funbear Bro is actually going to trigger. Funbear Bro needs cards like Lone Wolf to throw down as much power as possible, but then cards like Rumbro end up starved as a result. Interestingly enough, Funbear Bro is the only minion in the deck who never cares about being the only minion, so maybe in a different context it would matter, because then you'd be starting from a base of 10 instead of 5, making the shield factor that much better. I'm slowly coming to terms with the fact that there will always be a camp that is pro-Funbear types, and is just unfortunate because a faction that cares about only having one minion on a base would do well to have less minions overall, and Funbear Bro is the odd one out who could be replaced for more actions. Because of the ease of exploitation, action heroes have a surprising number of partners that aren't named kaiju. You just have to pick one particular aspect of their strategy and run with it. For Tornadoes, that play was Gracie Brones. With a Category 5, Tornadoes now have a way to incrementally add power counters while setting up some big plays with Gracie Brones. Their persistence also lets her power up over multiple turns for some chain reactions. Thanks to an assist from some bases, and the fact that Category itself supplies power for presence, I managed to get Gracie to triple score, including a replacement base. Picked Up and Gone with the Wind really go far in this deck, especially since Gracie is friendly with minions who move on to there. Action heroes also want to be really efficient because they have limited bullets, which makes waste strategies particularly potent. They also have some very intriguing options for kickbox throw like Whirlwind. Tornadoes definitely appreciate the extra actions, especially movement that can trigger in Phase 3. Sometimes with action heroes, you need to spend turns trading factions. What if the other faction didn't want to break bases at all? Action hero bursts trade out nicely for alien plays. Invader bouncing is good to do on Command Bro's base because he checks at the end of the turn. You give Kickbox Bro some of the most powerful actions in the game. In the case of a Phase 3 terraforming, you get all the well-documented Sonasian shenanigans that terraforming can do. But it's worth noting that, once Kickbox Bro's 1 minion requirement is consumed, you have little to lose by adding another minion there, which terraforming can do. 1 Bro is also very good for terraforming ninja bases. Once a base starts getting solo attention from your rival, terraform it into a ninja base and drop Robo there since the breakpoint reduction really helps on ninja bases anyway. Add in some other ancillary benefits like searching for invaders and saving them after a base scores, and you can see that this combo lines up really well. The right person, especially with abduction, is a really good invader play as well. But the first combo I immediately thought of, aside from the obvious targets, is one that I rarely talk about, Minions of Cthulhu. Minions of Cthulhu bring 2 more time loops for Kickbox Bro, but the type of actions you can get to play are very scary in Phase 3. Even better, you get Cthulhu, a power-based titan who can rack up power quickly, which the action heroes love since it is not a minion. They have minions who blow themselves up, so the minions of Cthulhu are already used to being minion-starved, and they recur actions, which solves a key action hero weakness of limited bullets. If you beat action heroes by playing fast, you have madness spam to slow them down. I've even had success with Cthulhu's Chosen, accentuating their come-at-me potential. Like aliens, you can sprinkle in VP farming in more ways than one, including a Kickbox Bro play that triggers furthering the cause out of nowhere. Personally, I much rather prefer double corruption for very powerful steals in Phase 3, and it's a lot harder for action heroes to be weak to waste movement when there are so few minions on the board. From a steal perspective, with Whispers in Darkness, it's easy for Cthulhu to gain 3 powers with even just 1 corruption, as you draw 2 Manus cards and can play one of them with the 3rd play. Action heroes often seem antithetical to Smash Up, but I must admit that I am more intrigued than I would like to be. They are super gimmicky and feel wrong to play, and yet I find myself trying to make their idea work, an idea that I am philosophically opposed to. So there's something to be said about trying something new and forcing players outside their comfort zone. It's a weird feeling because Sonus and I always argue about the 2 great paradoxes of Smash Up. I believe that a faction is in 100% of its own game, whereas Sonus argues that 100% of a faction's game are played with a partner. Action heroes force me to switch sides temporarily on this, arguing for cards that need to work with others, which takes away from their main design philosophy. I cannot begin to stress how much this grates my nerves, because I feel like I'm contradicting everything I've said over the years and hundreds of videos. But for more casual players who just like to blow stuff up, I can see this faction being really popular, even though they work well. And let me be clear, I think they work way too well. I wouldn't say that I particularly enjoy them because it feels wrong, but as this is the internet, someone is sure to like them. So what do you think of action heroes, and who are you planning on trying with them? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching, be sure to like and subscribe, let's shut it down.